Pam Bondi may have walked into the hearing room with her trademark confidence, but that confidence didn't last long. What should have been a ceremonial moment quickly turned into something else entirely, a trial by fire. The room was heavy with anticipation, and from the very first question it became clear this wasn't politics as usual. It was a test of credibility, integrity, and independence. Senator Amy Klobuchar wasted no time setting the tone. The spotlight was no longer on the polished smile Bondi wore, it was on her record, her decisions, and the contradictions that had followed her throughout her career. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The Department of Justice wasn't just another agency, it was the country's guardian of fairness, independence, and civil rights, and Klobuchar was determined to find out whether Bondi could actually rise to that standard or whether she was simply another partisan loyalist cloaked in polished rhetoric.
Now,
And if I am confirmed, I intend on bringing in Gail Slater. She is amazing, and I think bipartisan support for her, and did a lot of antitrust. Well, I had someone who knew antitrust much better than I when I was state attorney general, and it's very important.
but how
Very
about
important.
the resources for the division? It has been, under this administration, the current outgoing one, they have added lawyers and others to it. And my question was, is if you'll continue that?
Yes, I was actually looking at the structure of that unit, and if I am confirmed, I've been a little busy. I plan on working with Gail
Okay.
Slater and all the lawyers in that unit.
Okay. And then just, you and I discussed some of the important cases, the Google case, Live Nation, Ticketmaster, the Apple case, I don't know if we talked about that one, but RealPage. And will you commit to continue these cases and to pursue remedies that will fully protect consumers from anti-competitive conduct? I'm not asking what the result will be. I can imagine you couldn't answer that, but I'm just asking that if you are confirmed that you will continue the work on these cases.
Yes, Senator, I haven't looked at those on a case-by-case basis, but I'm committed to that type of case and protecting consumers. And I will look at that and have that unit look at that right away.
Thank you. At its founding in 1870, the Justice Department's priority was to enforce civil rights. That's what was founded, the reason guaranteed by the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments during Reconstruction. Today, civil rights enforcement is led by the Civil Rights Division. Do you believe it is a critical mission of the Justice Department to vigorously enforce our nation's civil rights laws?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Voting rights. Will you commit to properly enforcing federal laws that protect the right to vote that are critical to ensuring free and fair elections like the Voting Rights Act?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. We're back to the FBI nominee. Again, I express my deep concern, Cash Patel. He has vowed to retaliate against the president-elect's enemies, quote, not just in the government, but in the media, end quote. As we know, the president-elect has already sued a pollster in Iowa whose predictions turned out to be wrong, which happens with pollsters all over the place, as we all know. But a free press is essential to our democracy. Reporters must be able to do their job without fear of being investigated or prosecuted. Will you commit that the Justice Department, under your leadership, if confirmed, will respect the importance of a free press?
Absolutely.
And if the president or depends on who the FBI director is, I have some strong views on that, tries to push to go after the media, how would you respond to that?
I have not, clearly he's made some statements, but I haven't talked to Mr. Patel about those statements, but going after the media just because they're the media.
From the start, Klobuchar's line of questioning struck at the heart of one of the most urgent issues of our time, corporate power. Klobuchar wasted no time diving into antitrust enforcement. She didn't mince words, rattling off heavyweight cases, Google, Live Nation, and Ticketmaster, Apple, RealPage. These weren't abstract disputes, they were cases that directly affected millions of consumers, shaping the price of tickets, the cost of apps, even the way information flowed online. Klobuchar asked Bondi point-blank whether she would commit to continuing these cases. The answer should have been straightforward, but instead Bondi offered polished assurances without substance. She leaned heavily on advisors, pointing to names like Gail Slater as though invoking an expert's resume could shield her from the core question. Yes, she said she was committed. Yes, she said she would ensure resources were available. But as Klobuchar pressed for more detail, Bondi's answers stayed carefully vague. She hadn't reviewed the cases. She couldn't speak to specifics. She'd look into them later. The contrast was striking. On one side, Klobuchar demanded conviction. On the other, Bondi projected caution, offering little more than platitudes. The larger message became clear. Antitrust wasn't just about legal paperwork. It was about whether the Justice Department would stand up to the unchecked power of corporate giants. And on that front, Bondi's evasiveness spoke volumes. But antitrust was only the beginning. Klobuchar then pivoted to the very foundation of the Justice Department itself. She reminded the chamber that when the DOJ was created in 1870, its core mission was enforcing civil rights in the wake of the Civil War. Protecting those rights guaranteed by the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments wasn't optional. It was the DNA of the department. So she asked Bondi, would she commit to vigorously enforcing civil rights laws? Would she defend voting rights at a time when they were under renewed threat across the country? Bondi gave the predictable yes. Yes, she said civil rights were critical. Yes, she would protect voting rights. But once again the responses felt like pre-packaged sound bites. There was no fire in them, no urgency, just safe answers designed to avoid friction. For Klobuchar, the exchange revealed something deeper. The real question wasn't whether Bondi could recite the right words in a hearing. It was whether she had the backbone to enforce those rights when political pressure came crashing down, and that test was still to come. That brought the conversation to the heart of the matter: independence. Klobuchar reminded the chamber of a long line of attorneys general who had drawn a firm line against White House interference. Independence wasn't optional. It was the cornerstone of the DOJ's credibility. Would Bondi uphold that tradition? Once again, Bondi insisted she would. She said she would resist interference, she would act as a guardian of justice, but her history told a different story. Over the years, her record had been riddled with conflicts of interest and controversial decisions that raised serious doubts about her willingness to stand apart from partisan influence. The optics were hard to ignore. Bondi presented herself as the guardian of the law, but her track record suggested she was far more comfortable playing the role of loyal insider. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. And then Klobuchar raised a name that made the entire room shift. Cash Patel's name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Patel had gained notoriety for radical proposals, including calls to dismantle the FBI's intelligence division and go after members of the press. Klobuchar pointedly asked Bondi where she stood on these views. Would she distance herself from such extremism? Would she make it clear that targeting journalists for doing their jobs was unacceptable? Bondi's response was telling. She claimed she hadn't seen the remarks. She said she couldn't comment. She offered evasions rather than a principled stance. For observers, the meaning was unmistakable. Bondi wasn't willing to challenge extremism within her own camp. She wasn't willing to risk confrontation, even when the issue was as fundamental as freedom of the press. It wasn't just caution, it was avoidance. And that avoidance revealed a troubling vulnerability: the unwillingness to push back against reckless ideas when it truly mattered. And Klobuchar wasn't finished. Next came healthcare, a subject with enormous stakes for millions of Americans. Klobuchar zeroed in on Medicare's newly granted power to negotiate drug prices, a reform designed to finally challenge big pharmaceutical companies and lower costs for patients. Bondi vowed to enforce the law. On paper it sounded like a commitment, but for anyone familiar with her history, the words rang hollow. Bondi had long been an opponent of the Affordable Care Act. She had fought against it, attacked its provisions, and stood firmly with efforts to dismantle it. Now suddenly she claimed to be a defender of consumer protections. The contradiction was glaring. Klobuchar highlighted the hypocrisy with precision. How could someone who spent years trying to burn down the house now claim they would guard the porch? The performance exposed something deeper than a policy disagreement. It revealed a pattern of convenience. Bondi reinventing herself when it suited her, abandoning conviction in favor of survival. If the exchanges up to this point had been heated, the conversation around reproductive rights turned the spotlight even brighter. Klobuchar pressed Bondi on the FACE Act, legislation designed to protect clinics, patients and medical staff from threats and violence. The question was straightforward: would she enforce it? Bondi said yes, but then she added a caveat: the law should also apply to pregnancy centers. At first the line sounded balanced: equal enforcement, equal protection. But in reality the equivalence was misleading. Abortion clinics had long been the primary target of harassment, intimidation, and even violence. Pregnancy centers, by contrast, had not faced anything close to that same scale. By framing them as equally vulnerable, Bondi diluted the urgency of the law and softened its focus. The answer wasn't impartiality, it was a calculated gesture to appease her conservative allies. Once again Klobuchar peeled back the veneer. The response wasn't about justice, it was about politics. By this point, the pattern had become impossible to ignore. On issue after issue, antitrust, civil rights, DOJ independence, FBI oversight, healthcare, reproductive rights, Bondi's answers were hollow, evasive, and non-committal. Klobuchar, on the other hand, sharpened each exchange into a referendum on Bondi's credibility. Every vague answer became another piece of evidence. Every evasion became another crack in the facade. What emerged was not a portrait of a fearless leader ready to defend the law. It was the portrait of someone carefully managing optics, avoiding accountability, and refusing to take firm stands when they mattered most. In the end, the hearing boiled down to one defining question: would Pam Bondi serve the public interest, or would she serve politics? Klobuchar's questioning left little doubt. The facade of independence crumbled under scrutiny. Bondi's promises felt hollow, her assurances flimsy, her record riddled with contradictions. The hearing wasn't just about one nominee, it became a referendum on something far greater: the future of the Department of Justice itself. Would it continue to stand as an independent pillar of democracy, or would it be reduced to just another partisan tool? For viewers watching closely, the choice was clear. Bondi had walked into the chamber projecting strength, but walked out exposed as a partisan loyalist pretending to be a neutral guardian. And that leaves us with a question worth asking: was Bondi ever convincing, or was this just politics dressed up as principle? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this fight isn't over. It's about far more than one hearing. It's about whether the Department of Justice can still stand independent in an era when partisanship threatens to overwhelm everything in its path. If this breakdown hit home, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next showdown we cover will be even bigger, and you won't want to miss it. Stay sharp, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next one.